Welcome to the Daily Edge. Steve, Jake, Mark, we are the Noodlebergs. Let's find our edge. And that starts with the affirmation. I present myself with confidence and intention because how I show up shapes how I am perceived. Great way to start the conversation. How do you show up?
So,
where are our blazers? Yes. So we do. All right. So that's a great place to start, right? We have at On the Ball, our company, right? Corporate training and development, sales and leadership. We have a dress code that says when we are on site, it is at minimum a collar, at maximum a blazer, right? In the office, right? We're coach casual, as we like to call it. Could be a sweater, could be a zip up, but we have a standard that we've put into place based on what the scenario is. Why did we do that?
Well, when in doubt, always wear a blazer.
Why?
Because people treat you differently based on the way you show up.
That's a truth that people don't want to accept.
Right. So first impression is, ooh, look at this guy. Look at this lady. Bang. You want a testament to all of this. Get on a plane. Any of you have been on a plane recently? People are wearing their pajamas, man. It's like they decided not to dress at all.
Forget about a plane. I've walked into people's offices. I've gone in and met with people, and they're there in sweatpants and a t-shirt. And I'm like, what's happening here?
Or Zoom, the cat is running behind them. And I'm like, what is going on?
So there has been a for sure change in expectation, right? Work from home started to break down the barrier of like, what should I be wearing and when should I be wearing it and why am I wearing it? We brought in like the athleisure into work. Thank you. Where Jake and I are in athleisure right now.
Call it like pre-pandemic, right? Well,
it's Lulu, man.
It's Lulu. Like everything pre-pandemic, it felt like it had to be perfect, right? Because then we got to the pandemic, it was a shattered world, right? You had kids running behind Zooms, you had mothers like being, I'm so sorry, or parents, and like we then over-indexed to accepting everything, right? And that's we were in a place where fair. Like we couldn't really control, and so we over-indexed one way. And now coming back, that's now another stigma that we have to get over of you have to put on pants again. You have to show up looking the right way. And we're not the only industry in sales and business or whatever it might be that is changing.
You have to, because how people view you matters. And if you don't like that, go live in the woods. Go exit yourself from society where you can live on your own rules and do whatever. But this is it, right?
One goes in the quote book,
everybody wants to be like, it doesn't matter what I look like. It's about my quality of my character. Sure, your quality of character matters. But what people judge immediately when they see you is what they see. And so if you want to try to influence that narrative in somebody's head, you got to make a choice on the way you present yourself.
What's the Dion quote? Feel good, look good, play good,
get paid good.
Right.
Yes.
Like there is a direct
look good. Right. He starts with look good. It's the reason he dresses the way he dresses so that he then feels good about himself, changes the way he feels. And if he feels good, then he plays good. And if they play good, if you play good, they pay good.
No surprise that his cleats are still outselling everybody. So it's all about that. But I liken it to when I first started to speak on stage. After writing the book, I got invited to, I saw everybody was dressed in, at least the males were dressed in hard shoes and, shirt and tie. And I was like, that's not me. I'm not going to do that. I don't wear socks. So I started to wear like louder blazers, really sharp, but, really on point, jeans and, very cool sneakers.
How did you choose? How did you choose sneakers, jeans, and a loud blazer? What created that decision?
If I'm going to be on the stage for 90 minutes, man, my feet are going to hurt. And so I was like, I got to wear something that allows me to be me and to be comfortable, but still dress at a very high level. So, custom blazers, there isn't one time that I wear one of the blazers where someone doesn't reach out and go, love your blazer. Love the, we went to a recent meeting that we were at and the guys had a conversation with me about socks.
Yep.
I didn't even remember presenting to his group long ago. He was on, he was not in person. He was on Zoom, but he loves socks. I don't. That was a conversation point. So, I think when you dress right or dress appropriate, it leaves you room for expression.
So we've set the standard that now dressing or the way you dress matters. You have the New York Yankees that have had a policy for decades about not having a beard, and they just decided to change and said, well, you can have a beard as long as it's well kept and manicured. What is they're going lax. They're softening on their stance. I have a beard. Jake has a beard. You have a goatee. We all have facial hair, right? But the Yankees had a very specific brand and stance saying no facial hair. Are they weakening? Are they getting soft?
Definitely not. When I was growing up in sales, I was told point blank, if you have facial hair, people think you're hiding something. It's not good to be in a sales role and have, which couldn't be more bullshit ever. You just can't have a beard that's flowing down to the floor with hair coming out.
ZZ Top. You couldn't look like ZZ Top.
Right, so
I actually have a picture from when I'm like 6 wearing a top hat.
So I think what the Yankees did was get a dose of reality, is that you can still look good. And they had an antiquated policy, and they took a look at it and said, it's incumbent upon us to take a look. The world has changed, and let's move in a different direction.
I want to talk about the expression thing that you talked about, Mark. I think was, it gives you a sense of expression, and everything we've talked about so far has been external. Yep. How everybody envisions you, how they see you, what's the first thing they get. What about the internal side?
Right.
Is fitting into something you're not hurts your performance, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right? Like that messes your mindset up, right?
Yeah.
So if you are someone who likes to express themselves or wear certain clothes or colors, taking that away from you or taking that ability away from you limits who you are as a human, in my opinion.
Yep.
Right? And it's these guardrails that we need to create for organizations, our people, and no matter whether it's a sports team, a business, a school, schools have uniforms, it puts internally, you should do it in a way that gives the people some enthusiasm, right? And some excitement to dress. And I'm going to talk about Travis Kelce again, but like Travis Kelce, the way that he showed up to the Super Bowl, I would never allow it, right? Like you allowed it to be bigger than what the actual moment was. Right. You made it about you and not about the team or showing up in a suit. Like you made that a runway. And the NBA does that now, where they show up in designer clothes.
Ryan Clark does a whole series.
The NFL and the NBA, like they are constantly making the pregame about what you're wearing in the fashion.
I would love because I know my experience with it, but you have been a part of a couple teams. And how did you guys decide on what you would wear to travel?
Well, so when I first got involved with college football at Florida State, the expectation was that you were going to wear a sweatsuit. Right, a team issued Nike sweatsuit.
Still have one of those. Right?
And that was
hard to get. Man.
That was everybody wanted it. Right. It was super cool. And then when Jimbo took over as the head coach and moved us in a different direction, it was non-negotiable. You were going to wear a shirt, a tie, and a blazer, sport coat. And if you didn't have one, team was going to provide you one. Right. Team was going to make sure that you had that.
Show up to work.
Well, because it was a mindset, right? You were going on a business trip. And the way you dress should then inform that. So it goes back to this idea of like dressing for the occasion, right? And what are you trying to do today? In the Bible tells you to put on your armor every day by reading the word, right? I liken that to what you wear every day. When you step out, if you don't feel good about it, like you said, like if it doesn't match who you are, you're immediately walking into the world feeling like an imposter. It's impossible to be successful if you don't feel like yourself when you step out.
It's a double-edged sword, and you bring up a really good point. So I was wearing these blazers, jeans, and sneakers. I fly to Kentucky to work with a company, and I light them on fire. They had 6 of their top dealers there with 3 or 4 people, and it was an amazing 3 hours. The feedback was great, and I didn't hear back from the client. And I waited and I waited. I finally reached out and I said, hey, what's up? I haven't heard from you, but everybody there is like, wants more and whatever. They go, you wore jeans. And I was like, and and they go, we have an IBM culture and jeans are just forbidden. And nobody could get over the fact that you walked into the corporate office wearing jeans. Now, they were, more expensive than most people's suits, but the reality was they were making a decision on my clothing, not what I did.
Yep.
Even though I lit it up, they said best presentation and all like that, which instantly made me know I was not a fit for them.
Right.
Well, that's
Right.
the key point, right? Is when do you bend your policies so much to cater to your people, or when do you hold strong and saying maybe you're not a fit for us, right?
And so that the thing you have to do then is be super crystal clear on your identity.
Yeah.
Right.
If you don't know who you are, you're going to constantly then try to have everybody else tell you who you are and fit into everybody else's version of who you think you are. Only you can define what's right for you. And then you got to be unbelievably confident about that. You were okay going, excellent. You're going to disqualify the content because of what I was wearing. You and I would never work well together. Thank you for allowing me to figure that out up front, rather than trying to find out, well, what does this company wear? What's their dress code? I'll fit into them. Then they want to work together. Now you're like, oh, I got to put on pants all the time and I got to be like this all the time. You make yourself miserable for what?
It's so funny because I built this reputation of what I was wearing and stuff like that. I got invited to speak to a bank in Greenville, South Carolina. And I'm thinking, Greenville in the winter, Shay and I got ready to go and I wore a plain black blazer. And the young lady who was the president of the bank said, I'm so disappointed. And I said, what? She goes, I hired you because of the blazer. I was like, oh my God, I felt terrible. So, those people watching, you know who you are.
It's, no matter what the policy is or the standard operating procedure, you need to make sure that it's flowing throughout the organization, right?
True.
And that it's not just passed down from the leadership team that doesn't have any interaction with your people, right? You need to make sure your core values are being preached by those middle managers that exist. Because I go back to the story that Dwayne Wade just talked about how it was really easy for him to become a pro because of the leaders that were around him.
Yeah.
And he talked about Anton Walker and Zoe,
Gary Payton.
And Gary Payton. He goes, they were there to set the standard. I didn't have any questions on how I was supposed to act.
Right. And it gave him freedom to then just operate. Because all these guys got the system around me.
Right. And so that wasn't directly from Pat. It was, but it wasn't. Right. He doesn't talk about, well, Pat told me to do this, and so I did it, even though that was Pat's standard. Yeah. But it was passed down through other people.
Because they owned it.
They owned it.
Right? They believed in it and owned it, which is true for your business, is true for your sports team, is true for your family. The identity that's created starts from the leadership, but the identity then gets destroyed the longer you have people in that group that don't believe it. Forget about actually operating in it. They have to truly believe it first. Then it can come out in their behavior, because if they don't believe it and they try to operate in it, it's going to come off as phony. And it's going to come off as fraudulent.
I loved what Steinbrenner said, was that he goes, after weeks of taking in, or weeks or month of taking in advice and perspectives from former, current, I now have to make the decision, I love that.
Right.
He said, I love that he put it in his message to the public, because a lot of people are pissed off. I just had a client today, 78 years old, and he looked at me and he was like, the Yankees got soft.
Yeah, right.
They got soft. And he's like, I can't even look at them. And he goes, and they have a patch? What, they don't have enough money? They need to advertise on their jerseys?
Unbelievable.
Right? And so you have this old school, new school
the Yankees
thing.
have a patch?
I don't know.
I did not know that.
Honestly, he told me that. I think,
did they really?
Right?
Oh my God.
Right. You ruined the pinstripes. You ruined it,
Wow.
But you are going to offend some people when you make changes, right? And you are going to alienate some people. And there has to be that understanding from both sides of saying, hey, times are changing. We have to change. And we're going to use it on this podcast, maybe every episode. But if it's not good enough, we have to change, right? And I really did love that he took the initiative to even tell people that I took in the perspective. And now it's my job to make the decision.
Which that is true leadership. Is, okay, I'm willing to listen and then I'm going to make the decision based on what I want the identity of the organization to be. That is how teams operate. And if you do not have people at the very top and at every level, right? You have to have leaders at every level of the organization, because everybody has to be willing to take that directive and believe and fit into that, and then hold everybody else accountable to
So here's the question. I love it. I've been waiting for this one. So Yankees are mid-season, right? They removed this policy and they're having a shitty year.
Is it because they have pebbles on their face?
So does Steinbrenner go, that's it? Everybody, and he sells the sponsorship to Bic or something?
I would hope not.
Or Gillette.
I would hope not, particularly in sports where they do an unbelievable job of paying attention to the right numbers that lead to performance.
Right.
You would think they would know it has nothing to do with beards. It has everything to do with what they did. I'll go back to your Travis Kelce statement, right? Did him playing poorly or did them losing really have anything to do with the suit that he wore?
No.
Definitely not. Did they probably not prepare as well, or not have that same hunger, not have that same attention to detail? Maybe that was I would say that was probably more the case rather than the suit he wore to the game.
You will play better if you show up correct.
Right.
There's no doubt.
Right.
Like and there are always the anomalies. And I used to love this thing. And Mullen used to say it, and he goes, I'm not telling you not to smoke weed. He goes, he's like, I'm really not. He goes, I've just never seen the 1% smoke weed and be successful.
Right.
He goes, I've just never seen it.
He just raised the bar.
He goes, I've never seen it. And he goes, go smoke weed. If you smoke weed and you're still the best player I've ever seen,
okay,
good
great.
for you.
Right. Good for you. He goes, but I've never seen it. Right.
Yep.
And so the success stories that exist of showing up right, putting yourself in the right mentality leads to success far more than it doesn't. So why wouldn't you do it?
And there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? Which we've learned in sports, because there's a lot of different ways to call the same play. And there's a lot of different ways to run the same play. And you see it in business. There's a lot of different ways to do sales training. There's a lot of different ways to do leadership. There's a lot of different ways to accomplish the same thing. It's true for your appearance. There's a lot of different ways to accomplish that look or that perception that you're looking for. You have to find that. You have to take responsibility for it, because if you don't, you're living in somebody else's shoes.
So I want to make it broader than just appearance.
Sure.
Fundamentally, the Yankees looked at an old philosophy that they decided to change. This was something we put in place, and we're going to change it. What else is Steinbrenner looking at in the operation of the business? What other things should everybody be looking about? Hey, listen, we had a really successful show called The Daily Auto.
Yep.
It didn't. I didn't think it needed to change. You guys brought it up and said, we're looking at everything all the time because we want to change.
Gotta be better.
He even said that a year ago. He goes, I can't keep spending this way without the results.
Right.
He goes, I won't do it.
Right.
He goes, we're not making enough money and we're not winning.
Right.
He goes, so if that's not going to happen, we have to make a change. Now, they used to spend the most, win the most, and that was good enough. It's no longer that.
So the responsibility of leadership is to be looking at every single thing that's happening in your organization and say, should we change it? Should we look at an option? Should we? And that's what happened here. He took in the right. I love the fact that he had consultants and other leaders and other players, and he took in all the information and then said, I own that. So it should go for everything in the organization.
So in terms of your identity, because this show has been entirely about appearance, right? Where does that fit into the scope of your identity? Do you decide who you are first and then figure out what that looks like to match that? How do you define the identity of the group and then say, okay, what do we do in order? How do you do it? How do you do it? How do you do it?
I would love to start with me, just because I came out of
Then why don't you do that?
I'm going to start
with
asshole.
With you. You're going to start with you.
And I came out, and there was a very Noodleberg brand that existed, right, in the marketplace down here in South Florida, especially about wearing blazers, looking a certain way. And we showed up to events spitting images, you know, the three of us looking the exact way.
True.
And I didn't feel overly comfortable dressing that way. It wasn't my style yet. I was a little younger and whatever. And for me, it helped to see what everybody else was doing first, right? And to conform for a little bit, because I think I said it on the other show, you don't know what you are until you try it.
Yep.
You know, and so I gave it a run, and then it's slowly morphing your process, whatever that might be.
Yep.
Appearance, skills, has no, you know, doesn't matter. You have to try it, right?
Yep.
You have to start somewhere and morph off that. And for me, it was good to see the way that people interacted with you while you dress that way,
Yep.
or a banker dressing the way he did, or X, Y, and Z, and then slowly morphing it slowly but surely. And it's really funny because you start to connect with other people when you do that. You start to get one or two comments of them going, hey man, I like that. That looks cool. Or you did that. And you start to stand out a little bit more, and it builds that confidence, right? So just morphing a little bit to then find your identity is where I would go.
I like that you said, like, looking around at what other people are doing, because I think that's great, not to copy, but to get a sense of what does what are the options for me out there.
There's no doubt
what do
in my
people
mind
do
that the personality of the business starts with the leader and says, this is who we are.
Yep.
This is what we're going to do.
Mhm.
This is who we're going to do it with. And here's why. And we're going to look this way. We're going to act this way, you know, whether, you know, down to, do we send personal notes afterwards? I mean, every single touch point, it matters.
Defined by the leader.
It's defined by the leader. It starts up front.
I remember being in Japan and walking around, and everybody looks the exact same. They're like little carbon copies of each other,
right?
You know, and in America, we are not that.
No.
There's so much individuality. And that we should own it. We shouldn't run from it. And that every bank, like,
except it has boundaries.
Sure, but like,
it has
but I don't know.
boundaries,
But I'm
man.
talking like even our client Amaret. Like, I see their pictures, and they dress not completely like other bankers, where it's just like a blue suit or a black suit.
True.
And they are
They've
a little
got
bit
variance.
more. They have variance or forward thinking, and it separates.
But where
them.
does that line end? It's a very difficult subject for leaders, because yes, I want you to do that. I think one of the airlines just came out and said no tattoos.
That was Delta.
Wow.
Was it Delta?
Delta
said that you can't have any showing tattoos.
Visible tattoos.
Delta redid their standards.
Yeah, you know, and I, you know, can you wear colored hair? You know, I mean, you've got the leader has to set the boundaries, very clear. We talk about clarity all the time. Yes, you can express yourself, but you know, people talk about casual Friday. Casual Friday went off the freaking rails, man.
I'm gonna ask for a story, but can you tell the story of you putting on pants again for the first time during the pandemic?
I'm not sure of the story. So
revenue goes to zero.
Yeah.
Like, if we're gonna talk about appearance, this is
so. You know, the pandemic was actually good for our business.
Right.
We were doing great. We were trying to tell people virtual was coming. Anyway, long story short, we had a very strong base of clients who all were in indecision mode. They just didn't know. And they said, we got to stop until we figure out where this thing ends or whatever. And I totally respected it until the last one said, we got to stop. And we went to zero revenue. So the days prior to that, I would do, I drank beer. I had pub subs.
It's the spiral.
It was like every night it was tacos or Chinese food or pizza or whatever. That night I went to bed. I woke up very early in the morning, as I normally do. I showered, I shaved, and I put on real clothing and sat down at the table. And you woke up because we were living together at that time. And you said, what? And I go, I figured it out. I have the new business plan. And that only came from putting on the uniform.
That's
and I think
right.
Like, I felt
you got yourself
in the zone
that moment
because of that.
Right. Yeah. Which I think is so important. Like, I look back through my years of development, starting in college football and getting into working at ESPN and then, you know, working at On the Ball with you and doing all of these different, you know, stages of my career. And I can see where I was trying to fit into everybody else. I can see as a football coach where I was like wearing the quarter zip and the pants that were way too big.
Didn't you drive a Range Rover?
Well, so it's my evolution as a human being is so unbelievable because I was raised by you who really developed a sense of ownership of who I was for my own self. And then I ended up in the college football world
I'm a damn good dad.
A wonderful dad. But then I ended up in college football where they wanted to put that out. It was don't stand out. It was keep your mouth shut. It was get in line. It was look like everybody else and wait for your turn. And so I went from being the guy who was standing behind Bobby Bowden wearing Dolce & Gabbana sunglasses to wearing Oakley transition lenses and, you know, having a collar
and Range across the streets.
Like I went from like a buzz, you know, having a buzz cut and being as bland as I could possibly be. So like for me, I went through that. Well, I'm looking at everybody else and trying to understand the room that I'm in. And 12 years later, from the time that I was 18 to the time that I was 30, it wasn't until then, and I had gotten to a point in my career, I was like, you know what? I can be me. Yeah. I can wear what I want to wear. I can be who I want to be. And if they're not going to be okay with that, I'm okay at this point. And that led to the real exit from the industry because it turns out they weren't okay with it.
No.
They really weren't. They really weren't okay with me being who I wanted to be. And however that landed with the team, however that landed with the organization, which goes back to the leaders, right? The leader is the person who gets to decide. And if you have somebody who doesn't fit in with that, you got to make a hard decision. Are they talented enough that you're willing to navigate it and put up with it, which never leads to anything good? Or are you willing to make the hard decision that you're not a fit? So I think for me personally, I've never felt better than when I was in my own skin, dressing the way I wanted to dress, which allowed me to feel like I was really me and able to operate within the role, and finding the right place for that to fit. That is the most important part of your professional journey.
To this day, you know, genuine and authentic wins always. It's when you know, like, you know, people say, what's the difference between, you know, a business relationship and a friendship? And I'm like, nothing, man. It's the same.
It doesn't win always, right? And I think that's the thing you got to be okay with, is that if it's, you said it, when you showed up
on a personal level,
right? Wins for you.
Yes.
Wins for you.
Like, I don't care. Okay. If it doesn't match you,
gotta be okay with those
I'm
L's.
not going to change who I am for you.
Right.
Vice versa, from the leadership to your people and their people.
And people know
at the end of the day, you got to be willing to take the L's, whether it's losing somebody or whether it's not getting an opportunity. Being true to yourself, and your appearance should be a reflection of that, and you need to eat, sleep, and breathe that every day. And that's the edge.
Thing, as far as the Yankees go, doesn't matter, because Juan Soto is a Met. And his first time up, he hit a salami, baby.
All right, with a giant Awesome. Thank you for joining us and finding the edge with us. Remember, watch, listen, subscribe, share the episode with somebody who can use it. We'll see you next time.